And we are back. Welcome to the Soapbox, where people who work, volunteer, and care about recovery tell us who they are and what they're most passionate about. My name is Rich Jones, RN, and I represent parentingyourchildinrecovery.com and the home website, secondstarts.com. That's the number 2, NDSTARTS.com. Today, my guest is Jeff Parker. Jeff is the president of Vivon Recovery. Jeff, glad to have you here, and thank you.
Rich, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
It is great. Jeff, I start off every show asking everybody to give me that Cliff Notes version. And from hearing your story, this is interesting. So take your time and give us as much as you want to. Tell us about who you are, how you got here.
Well, I got here after developing a very late stage alcohol problem. And a little bit about me. I grew up in a little town on the coast of Washington State. Moved to Seattle when I was 18, went to college, went to law school at the University of Washington, did all the things you're supposed to do, had a great career, ended up running a law firm, and throughout that whole time developing an alcohol problem. And as I like to say, gradually and then suddenly. And I crossed the line when I was probably in my mid-30s, and it became really problematic after that. I was your typical high-functioning lawyer and got all the accolades, made all the money, all the toys, bells, and whistles, and I couldn't quit. So in 2010, I did my first round of an outpatient program. I had a wonderful wife at the time who was like, "You've got to stop this," and in the back of my mind, I knew I did. And I was sort of stuck in that space. How am I going to survive without my little chemical friend? But I know I've got to get rid of this mistress on the side, so to speak.
Right.
So I went through, walked out of that facility, riding the puffy pink cloud thinking, I've got this. And I think I lasted, 2 or 3 weeks. And then relapsed and started using again. Then my next stint was at an inpatient facility in the middle of February on the cold plains of Minnesota at Hazelden. And for those of you that don't know, Hazelden is sort of what they call the mothership. It's the original recovery center where the Minnesota model was developed. So I did an inpatient there. They had just started a lawyer's program a couple of years before. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go get sober with a bunch of lawyers. And I think I got out of there, lasted maybe 2 or 3 months. And, that day just happened. And for whatever reason, I picked up and started using again. So did another outpatient that last, I was drinking through that. And then my beautiful wife finally said, I've had enough. You've got to leave. And so, I did. I left that house,
Right.
Holly, the 2 kids, and, got a beautiful apartment overlooking Puget Sound, watching the ferries glide back and forth on their way into downtown Seattle. And I just spiraled. So, and lost everything at that point. And ended up doing one more round of inpatient in 2018. And I did something different, though, after that, because I had no I was out of money. Everybody, I still had good family support from my family of origin, thankfully. So I lived at a sober living place, and was going to stay for a month. Ultimately ended up staying and working there for a couple of years. And that's really what saved me. Okay. And what saved me was, I had accountability. I couldn't beat the testing system, and I'd been tested before, and I'd always figured out a way around it. And so this time, James and David, who ran, it's called Seattle Sober Living, Wonderful Place. They ran it. They knew all the tricks I knew. And a funny thing happened that I noticed was, as soon as my brain figured out I couldn't use, well, if I used, I'd get caught. My cravings diminished pretty dramatically at that point in time. It was like, the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. I didn't have to worry about, do I need to go use now? That momentary instant craving monster didn't jump up and grab me like it did before. So, after about 6 months there, my lawyer curiosity started getting to me again. And I thought, there's got to be a better way to get people clean and
Right.
sober. I'd watched all my friends in rehab do the same thing. Get out. We want to stay clean and sober. And excuse me. And, for whatever reason, we end up relapsing. So I dug into all the databases and started researching like mad. And I found a system that's used by airline pilots, doctors, and nurses.
Okay.
And it's called the Human Intervention Motivation Study, or the Human Intervention Motivation
Okay.
Model.
Okay.
And
Well, I will-
essentially go
let
ahead.
me,
Go ahead.
I want you to settle that in for us separately so they can separate your story from that. So, all right. And before we move on, I just want to say, for those who's listening, if you're the parent, mentor, or practitioner who loves or cares or works with the young adults at risk, in current treatment, or in some type of trouble, parentingyourchildinrecovery.com is a reference and a source for family members. And if you're a practitioner, you can also go to secondstars.com, the number 2 NDSTR, number 2 NDSTARTS.com. And we have information for you there. Okay. What I want to do for you now is I want to put you up on the soapbox. I want to get into that. Take off right where you left off. Talk to me about this hymns, because when you talked to me about it, give me the generality of this. It's brilliant, and it's simplistic but brilliant.
It is. It's simplistic. And essentially what it is this. I'll give you a little background.
Mhm.
In 1974, the airline industry decided that, wow, these pilots are valuable.
Right.
And we can't just fire them. How do we make sure that we can have them fly safely without being impaired? And essentially the method they came up with was, well, we're going to have to monitor them and test them rigorously to make sure they're not using.
Right.
And so they started doing that. And what they found was that actually the monitoring is probably the most powerful therapeutic thing that can be done to help somebody get out of a substance use problem.
Mhm.
So pilots will go to a traditional Minnesota model, rehab.
Okay.
But once they get out, they're not discharged right into the waiting arms of unextinguished cues and triggers. And the one thing we've learned is, if you stop using, in about 30 days, the craving incubation curve actually goes up. So you walk out of treatment, your body's healed a lot. You
Mhm.
feel really good.
Right.
The toxins are out, but the craving is still there. In fact, it's stronger. So that's why we end up with so much relapsing.
Right.
But so you go in, pilots will go in and do standard treatment. They get out and they go into a strict monitoring protocol. And they're required to go to either 12-step meetings or secular version, Life Ring or Smart Recovery or something
Right.
like that. They've got any co-occurring issues, anxiety, depressive disorders, bipolar, they've got to do their psychological psychiatric care. And, that's about it. And,
Right.
and it works really well. So the doctors and nurses figured this out in the early 90s and started their own versions of the programs. Doctors, PHPs, and doctors have, like pilots, a very standardized, good program nationwide. Nurses are you've got some nursing programs that are, they strictly follow this monitoring model, and they do well too. Others don't, and you can see the difference.
Yeah.
It's the monitoring that really is the key, and it's got to be long term. So you do it 3 to 5 years. But here's the thing, Rich,
Okay.
that's really amazing.
Right.
If you actually peel back the layers of the statistics on people who go to traditional treatment, only 15 to 20% of people with a severe substance use disorder, what we would typically think of as like addicts like me, we cannot quit. And those are most of the people that end up in inpatient.
Right.
Only 15 to 20% of those people are clean and sober at 5 years after their first initial treatment episode. With HIMSS individuals, 85 to 90% never relapse. they get to long-term self-sustaining abstinent remission. We've got studies of HIM style participants 5 years after their programs end. And
Okay.
about 90% of them are still clean and sober. So, and the other thing we've learned is, and this is research, and it's neurobiological research that's been done really in the last decade or so. And what we found is, there's really kind of two components to getting somebody clean and sober. The first is, you've got to get your humanity back, the thing that is you, which is in your prefrontal cortex of your brain. Okay. Drugs and alcohol affect our prefrontal cortex, the actual wiring, the neurology of that part of the brain. Now, good news, it will recover if you stop using and do some things. But we don't really deal too much with the midbrain, and that's that's where we live automatically. We have very little control over what happens in the midbrain, and that's where craving dwells.
Okay.
So what HIMSS does, if you're monitored, you can't use, you can't use, you're going to get in trouble if you use. It teaches you, after you confront cues and craving, cue trigger cravings over and over and over again, the midbrain learns by not using that, hey, we can get through this.
Okay. And
then craving becomes something that starts to diminish until eventually, for most people, it doesn't drive us anymore. I used to, and I think I'm pretty typical, if there was any booze around, I was going to find a way to get it. I mean, that's my level of craving was high. Now I have no desire to drink or use at all. And it took time. It took a few years to get to that point. But once you get to that point, you can kind of get free. And that's the thing, though. Craving feels like you need it in the moment. You're not going to survive till the next moment if you don't have the substance.
Right.
And that's why we go back and relapse so much. And that, craving there's lots of different parts of the brain. They call it cunning, baffling, and powerful. It is, because it becomes hardwired into us. So if we can support people, structure people in the right way, 85 to 90% of us can get to abstinent remission. But we need to invest the resources in the aftercare. Just sending people to rehab for a month of inpatient or 3 or 4 months of outpatient isn't enough. We know that. And it's actually, in the aggregate, a hell of a lot cheaper to set people up with structures once they get out. And the structures are the key.
I was going to ask you about that. Pontificate on that, the structures part, because that was very interesting what you told me. That's the structures and the friction part of that.
Yeah, that's it. Well, the structures, the primary structure is the monitoring. We use a device that actually tests the eyes. It's the pupillary light reflex. So, and we can do it remotely from anywhere in the world. Anywhere we've got a client that has a Wi-Fi connection, and we have our people get a hotspot on their phone, and we just send out a text alert. Hey, you've got a test within the next hour, and it's a device called Sober Eye. Put your eyes on it. It's very compact, and it only takes a minute, and it will say pass fail. So, and it detects any kind of drug. There are other devices out there. There's SoberLink is the one that people know about, a remote testing device, but that only tests for alcohol. This device will test for any psychoactive substance. So if somebody pops up, we have them go either get a UA if they can get there within the next 12 hours to a facility. If not, we have them do a PEth test, just because that PEth tests are far better than UAs in terms of a look back period. So our goal is lockdown. If you're going to get caught, that there is an almost guarantee you're going to get caught, you're not going to use. So that's the first structure. Now, the second structure is there's other parts of the brain we have to rebuild too. That prefrontal cortex that we talked about. That's where we live. That's where our humanity is. That gives us our sense of self, our identities, our belief system, our moral code. That white matter, gray matter, the connections between different parts of the brain need to rebuild, and they will once the toxins are out of there. But there are things too that help that reforming of that critical part of the people that we are. And the best thing for the prefrontal cortex is, psychosocial stuff, the AA meetings, the connections with other people. The cognitive behavioral therapy is good for that.
Right.
Motivational enhancement training is good for
Yeah.
that. Coaching, the stuff that you do, all of that's really good
Mhm.
for it. And then we've got the second part, which is kind of the midbrain or the rest of the central nervous
Okay.
system, which needs to. And a lot of that is the body. One of the best things we can do for our brain, we don't see it in the culture that we live in, but one of the best things we can do for our brain is actually to do for our bodies. And exercise is one of the best things that we can do in recovery. It
Yeah.
produces a chemical called BDNF, which is good for the brain, the
Okay.
hippocampus. I mean, it really does. So we have them do exercise. Meditation's good. Nutrition is key. And we actually monitor them for sleep patterns too. That's one
Okay.
thing we
Yeah,
found that
very
is
important.
critical.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your brain does all its work when you're sleeping. That's where the repair job happens. When you sleep, your brain reforms.
Right.
Neuroplasticity takes place there. So, excuse me, we have, a a variety of different things that we have them do, but you can't make somebody in early recovery. You can't throw a lot of stuff at them. They'll get too
Right.
overwhelmed.
Right.
So, you bring them along,
Mm.
and, we have a program that's 2 years.
Okay.
And, and we think if people do this for 2 years, we've had great success, just like the pilots, the doctors, and the nurses.
Okay.
They can get to that point of being stable and get to self-sustaining long-term abstinent remission. The craving monster will go away if you do the right things. And if you're not craving, and that you've got a good life, you're going to stay sober.
Okay.
And that's what we found. So,
Okay.
we do a tough cohort. Most of the people we help are lawyers, and
Yeah. I wanted to press off on that actually too. I saw somewhere where you said the failure, and I don't know if failure is too hard a word, of the employee assistance programs for these type of professionals. You know, is that because I noticed that professional groups will stick with professional groups, but do you see a deficit or a gap in how their associations go to help them versus a program like yours? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they do wonderful work, and it's really, the legal profession is really tough. It's a very, it's wedded to an old school culture. It's
Mm.
a very boozy culture. It's a very stressful profession. So, our substance use disorder rates are off the charts.
Okay.
One of the highest of any occupation you can have is to be a lawyer. And, we see that. So, there's a lot of resistance to change, but fortunately that's changing. People are starting to recognize that now. We have a system, wonderful people. They're called lawyers assistance programs. There's, I think, 54 of them. Every state has one, and then like the Virgin Islands and New York has a couple. So there's more than 50, and they do wonderful work. But again, we're kind of like the nurses. We don't have a national standard. We've got 50 disparate entities kind of doing their own thing. And so typically there's not an intervention that will get somebody like me before it's too late and get them into a strict HIM style monitoring program. So that's what
Okay.
we do. I mean, we take people before, the shit hits the fan, so to speak, and
Right.
everything falls apart,
Right.
and get them into structure to save families, lives, careers. And fortunately, most professions don't have that. If you look at your typical employee assistance program,
Yeah.
only 4% of the people use those. And when they really could, people who could use them. And, like anything with mental health or substance
Yeah.
use disorder problem, there's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of denial. So, you really got to get people to a place where, and I hate to say it, but, they're coerced, they're forced. Most people with a drug or alcohol problem are not going to make a change unless there is a precipitating crisis event that gets their attention. And then you've got to get the structures in there right away. And if you can do that, you can get, look, I was this close to death and nobody gave me a chance. And because I stumbled into structures, I'm here. And if we changed our treatment model, made structures the standard of care, we'd see so much better success. But that's
Agreed.
understanding that, getting out of a drug or alcohol addiction is a process, and we've got to do a lot of relearning. Those chemicals that we stuck into our brain taught us powerfully to behave in a certain way automatically, and we've got to get the brain to change. The brain can only change so fast.
Exactly. Jeff, I wanted to ask you something while you're talking. I'm come to my mind. I understand starting with basis in the law, but now as I speak to you, you really sound extremely knowledgeable about, physical processes, and treatment. I know what spurred that change, but how did you seem to get so good at it? If you can follow me, you seem to know a lot about this, not just from being in it, but you seem to have a lot of facts. How did you make that transition to becoming a treatment person versus a lawyer? Or do you still do law work? I mean, how does that work?
No, I don't. I just help lawyers at this point.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, being a lawyer, actually, we get a lot of jokes, and
Of course.
and people, you hate a lawyer, and you hate lawyers until you need one.
Exactly.
The old adage, right?
Mhm.
But it's really a wonderful education. It's a wonderful mindset to get into, to take a look at a lot of different things. And I did a lot of high stakes technical litigation that involved a lot of expert witnesses. So, in any given day, I had to know, okay, what's the fracture plane on cold rolled steel? So I'd have to dig into that, and I'd have to figure out everything about, okay, how's cold rolled steel work? I have no idea, but I have to prepare to depose an expert. So I had to know the questions to ask so that I could make sense of it. And then, ultimately at the end of the day, if we'd go to trial, put it together so, the average person could understand it in terms that the average person can understand. Because we all don't speak the same language. Statistics are their own language and the rest of it. So, I think that background, that mindset, having to take a look at very technical stuff and be able to pull out all the technical documents, go through them all very quickly, figure out what's relevant, what's not. That's a skill set that has served me well in a lot of areas, but especially this, because I have the ability to take a look at it and go, okay, this makes sense, this doesn't, and ask those questions and kind of distill it into a way that's understandable, and peel back the layer of the onion to kind of get to the truth.
Okay. You're sort of
And
putting recovery on trial, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I did kind of.
Yeah.
I when I finally faced it, I was like, okay, I'm going to cross-examine everything that I've been told in treatment, and what works, what doesn't, and a lot of it's really good. I have a love-hate relationship with AA. That's probably too strong of a word, but there's some things about AA that I think are very, very wonderful. And there's some things that, I think aren't so great, maybe, damage people. But, I can take it and look at it and go, okay, let's take what works and let's supplement that with something that works a little bit better, maybe. And that's kind of what we've done. We've just taken a look at it from, we talk about evidence-based in the treatment space quite a lot, but nobody really knows what the evidence is. And what is the evidence?
It is, what? I'm glad you said that today, because today I'm actually beginning to work on a newsletter article, and it is about, it will feature what I call medical jargon or cliche. In other words, we say things all the time. Evidence-based, evidence-based. Nobody knows what anybody's talking about because nobody knows even what the evidence is. We lack the base of it. But when you say evidence-based, it sounds pretty good. Evidence-based. Nobody even knows what the evidence is. So I'm glad we've got people like you, attorney mindsets, to actually let's shine a light on this, what this evidence is, and see, does it actually serve us or not? Because just because we say it is evidence, that doesn't mean it serves us. So that's very, very well appreciative. Jeff, before me, let me see. Let's go with if you are a parent, mentor, or practitioner who loves, cares, or works with young adults at risk, in trouble, or in some type of treatment, parenting your child in recovery is a non clinical accelerator to the clinical evidence-based treatments that you are currently using now. So you can go there, and in secondstars.com, we will show you how to work with us as practitioners or family members who are needing help. Jeff, before we go, so we got your story and we see what your mindset is. What does it look like when you actually can get someone to come to help? What does it look like when they reach you and they call you? What does it look like when somebody gets and goes to vivonrecovery.com? What's the first way, the steps that happen?
Well, we'll either get, usually we get calls from a law firm, or a referral from psychologists or psychiatrists who work with law firms. And usually it's a crisis. Okay. Somebody's gotten a DUI, or somebody shows up at a deposition at 10 in the morning and they're clearly drunk, or, they go to court and try to argue a motion and, they've got an alcohol problem, something like that. So then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we have to do something about this. So we'll get a call and, we'll go in, talk usually to the law firm first, and get a plan, set up. We'll send them out for an assessment. If they're willing. If they're not, there's, you got to kind of use a little bit of leverage, and that leverage comes in the rules of professional conduct, the ethics. You can't be a lawyer and drink. So it's okay. Here's what it is. And I'll go in and I spend a lot of time telling my story, which is, I mean, my story is, I lived in a $3 million house and then lived on the streets and had a career and lost it all. So I have a pretty good story that kind of motivates them to not want to go there. Okay. And then, we try to find, appropriate treatment. And we, for more severe cases, refer to a lot of professionals programs around the country. There's good ones, very, very good ones. Or a lot of our people go to IOP too. It depends on where they're at and what the assessment says. We send them out to professionals for assessments. Then when they come out, we have, we get them set up with the monitoring program right away, the abstinence monitoring, and we check in with them. Our average contact's about 4 times a week, just brief check-ins. Okay. And then we monitor what they do. Are they going to meetings? Are they taking care of their co-occurring stuff? Are they doing their health stuff? Are they doing their nutrition, the rest of it? And the thing that we've done, excuse me, Richard, that's right. We give a report card. So we have a reporting authority at the partnership, the law firm, and we do professionals other than lawyers too. So, whoever in the business occupational zone, because that's a critical piece. So we do like an elementary school report card, and they get that once a week. How are they doing? Are they getting an A, a B, a C? Did they not go to enough meetings? They get a C or a B or an A. And what we found is a lot of the people we deal with early on, their identity always was, I get 4 points. I get great grades. I get all A's.
Exactly.
So, I've got guys calling me now who are in their 50s saying, hey, I didn't get to enough meetings. If I go to the gym 3 more times, can I make up for it? How do I get extra credit? And they really are motivated to make sure that every week when that report card goes out, that they look good. And that gives them feedback, to themselves. So they get that to the family. We give that to the family. We give that to the employer. That really works well. And we just, we support them. We monitor them. It's not punitive. I mean, we love on them. Right. You got to love on an addict. Right. Man, we explain everything too. This is why we're doing this. And we explain the neurobiology. And fortunately, we're dealing with people that kind of get,
right. Exactly.
I'm logical. I understand. Here's what the statistics say. Okay, I get it. I'm gonna do this. Okay. So and we
Jeff,
do it. It works.
Excellent. Jeff, I want to thank you for coming on with us. This is enlightening what you said, interesting to see how professionals handle this, because it's in all walks of life, but it's kind of interesting to see that it affects everyone. And it's a good thing we got people like you who can, work with those people and enlighten us. So I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking to me about it. This is
Richard.
excellent.
I want to thank you for having me, and I really want to thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you so much.
What you do is wonderful, and I appreciate it. So
Thank you,
um,
sir. Jeff, for Jeff and myself, I want to tell everybody, and we want to remind you to let's get out there and help somebody get better. Let's help somebody stay better, and most importantly, let's help somebody be better. Thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Richard.